PSLE is coming. Can you solve this PSLE 2014 math question? And the question goes, an open rectangular box is shown below. When the box is packed full with 1 centimeter cubes, how many cubes touch the inside of the box? So in this case, let's change the dimensions of this box, length, breadth, and height, to something simpler so it's easier to understand. So we're going to put as 444, a cube. So let's start from the base layer, the bottom, since the height is 4 centimeters, and work our way to the first layer, which is the top. So in this case, I just divide all of this into cubes, as what we see over here. So let's start with the base layer, which is the bottom layer over here. So how many cubes are touching the inside of the box in the base layer or bottom layer? So in this case, if you say all of the cubes, then you are right. So how do we then calculate all of the cubes? We basically get the length and breadth. So the base layer is length times breadth, and this will be equal to 16. So now we know the base layer. Let's move on to the next layer, which is the third layer. So if we were to add one more layer on top of the base layer, will look something like this. Then we also have a top view that will look something like this as well, where the cubes are also touching the inside of the box. So how many cubes are touching the inside of the box in a third layer? So the thing is that if you guessed this, I would say cubes, then you are right. So how do we calculate the number of cubes touching the inside of this layer over here? So the thing is that we want to calculate no matter what's the length and breadth. So in this case, the length is 4. That means the number of cubes touching the inside of the box in the length is 4. What about the breadth? So the breadth of this top view is 4 and 4. If you guess 4, then you are not exactly correct. It's actually 4 minus 2 is equal to 2, because the length already calculate the cubes that's already touching the corners as well you see over here. So the total cubes touching inside of the box, the equation is actually length times 2, which is the green squares, and then breadth minus 2. Since the breadth is 4, we minus 2, then we multiply by both sides. And this will be equal to 12. So what if we were to change the length to 5? So the cubes of the length touching the inside of the box is 5. And then the breadth is not 4, it's only 2. So 4 minus 2. Then the total cubes, we will do the same equation, which is length times 2 plus breadth minus 2 bracket times 2. And this will be equal to, in this case, 14. So what if we reduce the breadth to 3? So same thing, we get the cubes of the length touching the inside of the box, which is 5, and cubes in the breadth touching the inside of the box to be 3 in this case over here. But remember, we minus 2, so it will be 1. So from here, we will just use the equation again, and this will give us the total number of cubes, which in this case is 12. So from here, whenever you want to get the layer that is not the base layer, touching the inside of the box, this is the equation. So let's go back to the third layer over here. We know the length and breadth is 4, so we just calculate it accordingly, and this will give us 12. Now let's move on to the second layer. So how many cubes are touching the inside of the box in the second layer? So the second layer over here, if you guess it's 12, then you're right. Using the same equation, we will get 12. Now, what about the top layer or the first layer over here? How many cubes are touching the inside of the box? So if you were to guess we are using the same equation, then this will give us 12. Now the thing is, can you spot a pattern? So the first, second, and third layer, since this is a cube or cuboid, the number of cubes touching the layers, except for the base layer, are the same. Then the thing is that, how do we then get this third layer? So the number of layers without the base layer is basically the height minus 1. So the height over here is 4, we minus 1, and this will give us 3. And that is how we get this third layer over here. So now with this, we are able to calculate the total number of cubes touching inside the box in this simple example. So total cubes touching inside the box without the base layer will then be equal to 12 times 3. So how do we get 12? If we get 12 from how we get number of cubes touching in one layer, and 3 is the number of layers without the base layer. So now we know the cubes touching inside without the base layer is 36. Then we can get a total number of cubes, which is 36, plus this 16 over here, which is the base layer. And this will give us 52. Now you understand how to get the number of cubes touching inside a box in an open box, in this case over here. Then we can just calculate from our question. So the first step that we did was to get the base layer, which is length times breadth. And this is 720. Then the number of layers without the base layer. So basically the height minus 1, and this will give us 29. Then the total of cubes touching one layer, this will then be equal to, if you were to calculate, is 140. So the total number of cubes touching the inside box without the base layer will just be the number of layers, 29, times the total cubes touching one layer, which is 4060. So now we know the base layer and the total cubes touching the inside of the box without the base layer. We now just add them up, and the final answer will be 4780. That's how you solve this PSLE math question.